All right, and we are live, everyone. So good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from. My name is Jesse, and I am with Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. For those joining us for the first time, we are all about bringing conservation, adventure, and science into classrooms around the world. And we are really excited this month because October has been our biggest month ever. By the 31st, we will have done 65 amazing sessions with groups from all over the world. So thanks so much for being part of our crazy amount of festivities. Right now, we've got 3 classes joining us live from across North America. So I want to give them a chance to say hi and do a bit of a shout out. We've got Miss Camplin's grade 4s in Guelph, Ontario. Hi, guys.
Hello.
Hey. We've got Miss King's grade 5s in Plymouth in Minnesota. Hi, guys. Hey, there's so many. What's going on? It's crazy. I love it. All right. And last but not least, we've got Miss Terrian's grade 3-4s in Moortown, Ontario. Hi, guys. Hey. Awesome. Of course, the reason you guys are all joining us today is for our speaker. So we are joined live by Ashley Vandepol at the Royal BC Museum in beautiful Victoria, British Columbia, Canada. Oh, we had our 4th class join us too, so I'll welcome them in a second. So yes, she's going to take us on a tour of their new exhibit there, Maya, the Great Jaguar Rises. So they're going to take us on this tour, learning a little bit more about the Mayan civilization, one of the world's greatest civilizations, and show us some artifacts that have probably never been seen outside of Guatemala before, other than the people who've actually been in the gallery. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to them. Thank you so much for joining us today, guys, and take it away. Go for it.
Hi, everyone. So first off, thank you for the welcome. I want to also welcome you to a digital version of coming to the Royal BC Museum. So we spent a lot of time working on this exhibit in the summertime, and I spent a lot of time in it myself. So I'm really excited to share it with you. And while we go through, I'm going to tell you a lot about Maya, ancient Maya civilization, but I'm also going to tell you some secrets of the exhibit itself. So some things that if you were walking through, you wouldn't know unless you had asked someone or they told you in general. So to start off, obviously I'm standing in front of a giant Maya sign. So one thing I want to point out about this sign, we'll get more into who the Maya civilization is when we get inside the exhibit, but I want to show you a little hint about this panel right here. So the glyphs below are the Maya, ancient Maya writing technique. So what the glyphs were, or what they're created for over here, is actually, it was created by the curator. So he's the one that created the exhibit, and it actually says something. So it's not just random glyphs put together, but it says the Maya arrive at the edge of the sea. So obviously here in Victoria, we're at the edge of the sea. So it's kind of like signifying that this exhibit or the Maya have arrived here in Victoria. Another thing I want to show you is a really important glyph to the Maya. So a lot of these glyphs either mean a syllable, so it's the sound, or they mean a word. This word right here, this glyph, means winnick, and winnick is a Maya word for person. So this is actually what the Maya call themselves. So keep an eye out while we walk through for some more glyphs. Now, before we head in, I want to show you this really neat facade right here. So the thing is, this exhibit is temporary. When you look at this, though, it doesn't seem quite like it's temporary considering how much it's made up. So a really neat thing about this facade is it's not real stone. So if you were to knock on it, you can clearly tell it's made out of foam. It's kind of shaved styrofoam. So this is actually made here in the museum, and it's a replica of some ruins called the Hope ruins in Guatemala. So the really neat thing about this type of style of architecture, if you look at it from far away, there's no glyphs on this wall, but it is actually the mouth of a monster. So you can see right above me is the nose, the teeth, and we're going to go through the mouth of the monster. So if you follow me. So welcome to the intro room of the Maya exhibit. So the really neat thing about this room is it kind of introduces us to what we're going to be seeing throughout the rest of the exhibit. So when we're looking in this room, we have some ancient artifacts from ancient Maya civilization, but we also have some videos taken of our contemporary or modern Maya civilization. So when we're looking at that, the entire exhibit itself, it tells a story of the Maya people who date back 5,000 years. So just in terms of comparing to other civilizations you may have heard of, kind of around the time ancient Egypt ended, that's when Maya started to really begin in Central America. So some civilizations that you also may have heard of, their neighbors, for instance, the Aztecs to the north and the Inca to the south. So the Maya were right in between, sort of in Guatemala, Mexico, so Central America. So in this front exhibit, another thing I want to show you, like I mentioned, I promised to tell you some secrets of the exhibit. So some of the secrets, if you will, we do have a lot of objects that are actually 3D printed. So the cool thing is these are replicas of real artifacts that we have here in the exhibit. But this one is really special because obviously all these 3D objects have Braille, which enables all audiences to be able to really see these objects if your type of seeing is actually touching. But another cool thing is while you're walking through here, aside of from getting your senses of sight involved, you're also able to smell some things. So this, if you're able to give it a sniff, is a copal bulb. So copal is actually a tree. There's actually a picture of it right over there. So the copal tree was actually chopped up, bits of resin were poured and created into balls like these, and the Maya burned them in what are incense burners, or what this is a replica of. So we'll see some more of them while we go through, try to spot them. All right, so we're gonna move to our next section of the museum, and we're gonna pan over the map just to give you some context about where we're talking about. So I've mentioned we've got Guatemala in the south here, and then Mexico is up here. If you've ever been on vacation to maybe Cancun, it's a really popular destination that's just over here. And then if we keep following this up, we've got the States, where some of you are right now, and then above Canada. So this is what we're looking at when we're looking at Maya civilizations. So now we're gonna follow, I'm just gonna walk to the end and let Jenny give you a chance to show you this section, the rainforest section. All right. So we just walked through the rainforest section, which really introduces us to the source of sustenance for the Maya. We also passed the San Bartolo murals, which are, they tell the creation story of the Maya and are incredible detail, but we don't obviously have the real ones because the real murals are still in the site in Guatemala. So the rainforest section really speaks towards the sustenance of the Maya. And when I say sustenance, that kind of just means where, you know, they're getting their land from, where they're getting their food from, things like that. So one neat thing about that is the rainforest. Remember, I mentioned some secrets of the exhibit. So the sounds you hear when I'm not talking sounds like a rainforest, but the neat thing is it was actually recorded just off the site of Tikal. So Tikal is a set of ruins in Guatemala, and they actually set up a recording device to record the sounds of the jungle. So you can hear birds chirping in the background, you can hear jaguar every now and then. So it's to really get all your senses going, like I mentioned. So we've now got sight and smell and obviously sound. So what we're gonna look at here is moving into this next section. So this next section looks at kind of agriculture, and we move more into daily life. So obviously I'm holding something interesting here. I don't know if anyone knows what these are. So this section talks about, we've talked about the rainforest, but now we have to talk about what the Maya are getting from the rainforest. So the Maya had very large cities, and in these cities there was anywhere from 10 to 20 million of Maya within their territory, the area of ancient Maya. So the neat thing about these cities is to have that many people in a city, you know, hundreds of thousands of people, you really have to have a lot of food. So the Maya were excellent farmers. What they did is they had this system called companion planting. Sounds kind of confusing, but it's basically where you plant a couple different types of plants to help each other grow, especially in a rainforest where the soil doesn't really provide the nutrients to grow plants. So they had maize, which we know is corn. And the maize, obviously we've seen cornfields, or corn grows tall. And what they would do is they would plant beans, which would grow up, vine around the maize, and then squash on the base of the forest floor. And all of those three things provided all the Maya people with enough nutrients to completely survive and also feed really, really large populations. So another fun food that I'm sure you're gonna be a little bit more interested in is, if anyone guessed it, this is cacao. So these are cacao pods, and cacao, of course, is what chocolate comes from. So the Maya revered cacao pods themselves. you could use as, the beans were actually sometimes used as currency, so money. So you could even pay someone with cacao. And they come from these pods. This is actually a dried out pod. So it would be bigger. It would almost look like almost like a papaya, a big fruit with seeds down the middle. So the thing with the Maya is obviously they revered it, but what they did is they treated it kind of the way we treat champagne. So champagne is sort of an expensive drink for adults, but champagne, it's really expensive. So some people, if they are really wealthy, they drink it often, and then if not, maybe for more special occasions, if you're more regular, if you will. So with champagne, it's obviously drink, but the Maya, same thing for cacao. They wouldn't eat it, but they would actually drink it as a hot chocolate. So with cacao, you could actually obviously, have a little treat, just like you would champagne. So while we move into this section, I talked a lot about cities and how large these cities were. So this section sort of introduces us and helps us feel as if we're walking within a Maya city. So we've got structures which are really similar to what sort of versions of a Maya city and structures within would look like. So these stepped pyramids. And then the neat thing about this exhibit is this floor is actually the first floor that our temporary exhibits have ever had where it's special just for the exhibit itself. So on the floor here, we can actually see outlines of the city. And every section we go to, it changes. So this section shows roads and buildings and kind of like a plan map. Another neat thing about this section is there's really cleverly hidden artifacts. So these artifacts have a lot to do with the daily life of Maya. So we have some bowls, we have different tools and implements for living your daily life, if you will. So now moving into this back section here. I mentioned earlier the creation story of the Maya. So the Maya believed that they believed in, I should say, about 8,000 gods. Quite a few. So because of that, or likely, I guess, because of that, the Maya would have to obviously have a form of writing to keep track of that many gods. I would not be able to remember 8,000. So this next section speaks towards the method of writing for the Maya. So I'll show you another really neat 3D print. I mentioned we have a ton of these around, and this gives you a chance to actually be able to touch these artifacts without damaging the actual artifacts. It helps us really get closer to these objects. So this is one of my favorite panels because it's so clear and you can really see what's going on with the glyphs, almost as if you're looking at the advertisement that I showed you in the beginning. So I'm going to show you a little trick. The Maya writing method is extremely complicated. And one thing that we do have for learning different languages, so for instance, ancient Egypt, their language is extremely similar. So we call their sort of letters or words, if you will, hieroglyphs. So the only thing with ancient Egyptian writing is we have this thing called the Rosetta Stone, which kind of helped people crack the code because there's a couple languages on the top of this stone that we knew, and then the language on the bottom was the ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs, and that's how we were able to figure out what it said. The only thing is we don't have a Rosetta Stone for Maya. So because of that, only about 80% of this is decoded. But I will tell you, we do obviously know how it would have been written and sort of what it means, and obviously there's a number of people working on continuing to decode that, but I'm going to show you a little trick. So the Maya method of writing was kind of similar to ours. It may seem much different. It may seem extremely difficult to kind of wrap your head around it, but they would read left to right, just like we would. But instead of going down the entire row and to the next one like we do, they would just start, same thing, on one glyph and move to the next one, but only in 2 rows. So you go one glyph to the next and then down, and you keep going that way all the way down until you get to the next row. And then you do it again. So another thing about these glyphs themselves, so each glyph means either a word or a syllable. So I'm sure we all know what syllables are, but I'll give you an example. So my name is Ashley. So Ashley would probably have 2 separate glyphs. And then what they would do is they would smush those 2 separate glyphs into one square, and that becomes a word. So all of these glyphs we see here, each are a word. Pretty neat, hey? So speaking of writing, now we're looking at kind of activities of the higher class of the Maya society. So this section is really neat. Aside from looking really cool, but it's supposed to make you feel like you're walking through a royal palace. So while we walk through here, a lot of the items and the artifacts that we're seeing are more typical. Usually, a lot of them are made out of more valued goods. So a really neat thing I want to show you over here. So when we think Maya, a lot of people tend to think of gold. The only thing is, it was actually the Aztecs that focused on gold a little bit more than the Maya. The Maya didn't have gold. They lived in an area that was primarily covered in limestone, so that's a type of kind of porous rock. So what they did have though was jade. So jade was extremely important to the Maya. So jade is actually almost as hard as diamond. So because of its durability and because of the fact that it's extremely gorgeous, it comes in all varieties of colors of green. The Maya would actually sort of, they used it was their type of gold, if you will. So we're just showing you some really gorgeous Maya artifact pieces here. For instance, we've got our little mosaic statue right here. Tiny, tiny little pieces of jade. So you can imagine if you're trying to cut through that, it would take an extremely long time. These are little portions that have been somewhat cut. So moving to our next section. So now we're leaving the royal palace and we're heading to the entertainment of the Maya. So I'm sure we've all heard of the ball game, right? So what this is right here, this is actually a rubber ball. It's made out of pure rubber, which comes from the rubber tree, if you will. And the Maya actually made it exactly like this ball. So the neat thing about the ball game is, I don't know if you know anything about it, but the ball game, the purpose or the kind of goal of it is to get this ball either through a hoop or hit a marker on the ball court. The only thing is you couldn't use your hands or your feet. Even your elbows were somewhat limited. You primarily had to use your hips. So this ball here, though, this is about 16 pounds. It's very heavy. I can barely roll it over. So what the Maya did is they wore kind of protective gear. This little U-shaped item here is called a yoke. And they probably wouldn't have worn ones like that made out of stone. That was likely just for ceremonial purposes. So just special occasions, if you will. But they did wear, rubber kind of protective gear, just like you would see a hockey player wear, or anyone that may be in a sport that they may get hurt in. So moving to this next section, we have a really gorgeous artifact right here. And it's got a great story behind it. So this is our Jaguar Man. So we obviously mentioned the name of the exhibit is the Great Jaguar Rises. So that really stems particularly from this piece here. So the neat thing about the story behind it is not the story of the actual background of the piece itself, but sort of its journey to a museum. So this Jaguar Man is made out of stucco. So if you've never heard of stucco, stucco is actually just smushed up limestone, which is just a type of stone, and it's actually burned. And limestone itself is not waterproof, but when you burn it and create stucco, it is. So a lot of Maya items, ancient Maya artifacts, were actually made out of this type of material called stucco. So this Jaguar Man right here is made out of pure stucco. The only thing with stucco is, aside from being waterproof, it's kind of fragile. So what happened is a group of farmers ended up coming across this Jaguar Man by accident. They were just digging up a hole for a well, I believe, and they came across him. So what happened is they wanted to extract him out, and some people ended up coming over to take him out. They tied a rope around his stomach, but the only problem is they thought he was made out of limestone and not stucco. So as soon as they gave it a good yank, it split right down the middle. And you can actually still see that split right here. So luckily it ended up in a museum with a very great conservation team who smoothed up that crack, and we can still see it today. All right. Moving on to our almost last section. Now this is more our political section. So you'll notice right away the carpet changes. We start to see red carpet. This section talks a lot about changes in the Maya kingdom. So we hear a lot about the Maya having this great collapse. A lot of people kind of explain it that the Maya disappeared. They of course did not disappear. But what happened is They originally lived in the southern areas of that map I showed you, so more in South Guatemala, in cities like Tikal, where the recording is from. But the only thing is, with drought and different wars and things like that, they actually ended up leaving their cities and moving up north. So they moved to other cities like Chichen Itza, Mayapan, Tulum. So these are all places, like I mentioned, kind of near Cancun, if you know where that is. So in these cities, this is actually where we move into a separate part of my history. This is where when the Spanish arrived in 1517, they come across the Maya within these cities, more in the tip of Mexico, if you will. So the thing with the Spanish arrival, we obviously have the Spanish initially competing and then wanting to completely eradicate the Maya culture because they wanted to get at the resources in Mexico, or what was then the Maya territory. So the thing is, the way they went about that was by, obviously there was large wars fought, but they also, in order to get rid of the culture of the Maya, they tried to burn all the books from the Maya. So this is actually a replica. It's called a codex. There's only 4 left in the world. And a codex is just another word for a Maya book, if you will. So it would fold up like an accordion. And this one is actually kind of a guide. It sort of explains, beekeeping and things like that. It's just one of many books that the Maya would have. But the Spanish ended up trying to burn as many as they could find because they wanted to eradicate the knowledge of the culture in order to take over the area. But luckily, 4 of the codices survived. And the Maya were also really resilient. So when I say resilient, they persevered through that persecution, but they also were able to come up with clever ways to make sure their culture lasted. So the Spanish were mostly Catholic, so they wanted their religion, or they wanted the Maya to practice their religion rather than the Maya's religion. So what they did is, they pushed it upon them, but the Maya were extremely clever by kind of tweaking that religion a little bit. So right here, we're looking at Mashimo. So Mashimo is actually the Catholic saint, San Simon, but Mashimo, or to the Maya, is also the god of the underworld. So by little tricks like these, the Maya were able to make sure that their culture lasted through to today. So like I mentioned before, we're looking at in this exhibit at Maya from 5,000 years ago all the way to our contemporary time, where now we have about 6 million Maya people globally and within their traditional territory as well. So one of the words that we have, we can note here in our contemporary section of the exhibit, so contemporary meaning modern day, is Kawinak, which means we are still here. So this is the Maya reminding us that they, of course, are still present and still here in the world. Now, this entire section talks about modern Maya life. So we can see methods of weaving, musical instruments, celebrations. Right in front of me here is an altar. So it's a continuation where they're continuing their traditional culture. But probably the coolest part of this section is actually a little television screen we have right here. So this screen is actually clickable. I won't click it yet, but what it shows us is all the different Maya languages. So remember when I was talking, kind of showing you how to read that glyph language of the Maya? So that's actually what we call Proto-Mayan. So if anyone's ever heard of Latin, Latin's kind of like the mother of our languages. And all the languages that came out of it are German and English and things like that. So the only thing is they're very different languages, but we all can kind of look back at this umbrella of a language. So Proto-Mayan is the ancient Maya, and then these are all the languages that came out of it. So there's about 30 of them. So they're just as different as German would be to English. And the cool thing about this screen is you can click it and a speaker of that specific language will pop up. So what I'll do is I'll click it and then we're going to end our tour and give it floor over to you so you guys can ask us any questions. So let me just pop this up here. All right, you might not be able to hear that very well, so we'll just skip out of it, but I promise you it sounds amazing. So we'll hand over the floor to you for questions.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for that, Ashley. That was a fantastic tour through the gallery. And really, we got a sense of Mayan as a people and what a fantastic civilization, art, sport, politics, and more. So I really appreciate you joining us for that today.
No worries.
All right, we've got 5 groups joining us on YouTube, 6 now joining us on YouTube Live. So if you guys want to just type in questions in the chat bar, just let me know where you're joining from and what grade you guys are in. I'll happily pass on a few questions to Ashley, so please do that. Don't be shy. But yeah, let's start with one of our live classes. So we'll start with Miss Camplin's group. If you guys want to kick us off with a question, come on up.
All right. So Clayne has a question for you.
What do they wear?
What do they wear, Ashley?
Well, we're in the perfect section for that. So the traditional Maya attire, I'll just show you a part of it. It's called the hupal. So it's typically a sort of shirt that's split at the sides, because the Maya actually wove, so they created clothing using what we call a backstrap loom. So this was an ancient practice, but it leads up all the way today, because this is actually from about 1920. So these are still worn today, and it's kind of a looser shirt because of course the weather, it's warmer in some Maya areas, but then they also would have worn wraps as well. So I'll see if I can find a picture of it for you to show you, but that would have been the top of the outfit.
Excellent. Very cool. All right. Let's head to Miss Tyrian's class. If you guys have a question, go for it.
You have a question? I don't think we have a question. I'm sorry.
That's okay. We can come back in a minute if you think of anything when we're going to the other classes. No worries,
Do
guys.
you have a question? Well, you lost your turn.
No, you haven't lost it. Come on up.
Sorry.
Yeah,
Come on, Aubrey. Closer. Come closer. Okay. Ask them loud. Oh, anyone have a question? All right. Come on. Let's go.
Oh, let's ask a question related to what we're talking about, guys. Okay, so we'll go to another class. We'll come back in a minute, okay? I'm going to go to Miss King's class. If you guys have a question, come on up, okay?
Yep. My friend Darby has a question.
Perfect.
How were the artifacts transferred from Guatemala to the museum?
Excellent question.
Good question. So they were very carefully packaged up, and they were taken in large freights. I believe they were brought over by plane. But the thing is, what happens is, because the artifacts are very old, as soon as they got here, they did have to spend a lot of time just sitting around to kind of acclimate. So sort of get used to the dampness that we have here and just the weather in general. So we kind of let them sit for a bit, and then we opened up the boxes.
Excellent. All right. You know what? I'm going to go back to Miss King's class because there's like 180 of you. So there's so many. It's like the whole school involved. So Miss King, if you guys have another question, go for it.
Yep, we do. Parker has a question ready.
Yep.
How many pyramids are there still today?
Good question. I don't actually have an exact answer for you, but there are, to give you an answer that's kind of vague, the thing about the Maya is all of the areas are completely covered in rainforest. So it wasn't actually until really recently that we had this really cool technology where you could put a camera on a plane and fly that plane over the area, because you can't trek into the rainforest. It's really dangerous, and it's a large area that's just rainforest. So it's really hard to get to those locations and to just find something that's been overgrown by forest. But this special camera on this plane can actually see through the rainforest and find out where those pyramids are. So we used to think there was only a couple million people, so a few cities, but now we know that there's about 10 to 20 million. So we're kind of learning as we go. So I can't give you an exact answer because there's still probably quite a few pyramids covered up by the rainforest that we have yet to discover, but hopefully it's going to happen a little bit faster than we thought with this new technology. So good question, but we can give you a more exact answer after, I promise.
Oh, that's fantastic. And let me get this straight for our classes. So there are literally cities of these ancient civilizations that had as many people as the biggest cities in the world today that are completely undiscovered in the midst of the rainforest.
Absolutely.
Great.
So when we used to think of this society, we used to think it was smaller, but now we can compare it to the Romans. So obviously we know the Romans were extremely large society, so it's really big.
Yeah. So just imagine, guys, if you can, like New York or Toronto or Los Angeles that are completely covered by rainforest, and there's still so much to find out there. Very cool. All right, let's go back to Miss Terrian's class. I think you guys have a question now, so come on up.
Anne, do you have a question? Anyone know the question? Yeah, Macy's also getting another chance. No, I don't think we do. I'm sorry.
That's okay. No worries. All right. Let's head to Miss Wells' class. You guys joined us in Port Basque, and it's so nice to have a Newfoundland class involved. So yeah, come on up, guys, and go for it.
When was the Jaguar made?
Man artifact found.
Ah, yeah. So when's the artifact that you guys showed us made?
Good question. So why don't we bring you back there, actually? We'll do a quick little peruse at it again. So the Jaguar Man would have been a couple thousand years ago. So it was about, we have to guess because we don't know exactly, because like I said before, this didn't start out in a museum. So there's not a lot of info on, when it was actually, because we need to know where it was found in order to know when it was made. But it was probably made about 2,000 years ago, give or take. If that answers your question. There's a lot of plus and minus when it comes to years in archaeology.
That's fantastic. All right, I'm going to take a few questions from a YouTube class right now. So Miss Sherwood's class, grade 3-4s in Burnaby in British Columbia, so not too far from you guys, wanted to ask, where does the name Maya come from, and does it have a special meaning?
Good question. So the thing, I mentioned a city called Mayapan. So remember how I mentioned how the Spanish arrived to the Maya within these cities, so Chichen Itza and Mayapan. So Mayapan was actually the Maya, who we know as the Maya people's name for that city, not the Maya people. They called their own civilizations the Winnick, or it was a different version of that. But Mayapan obviously was said a lot when the Spanish arrived. So they kind of took that word Maya and applied it to all of the Maya people. So it was a term that was kind of given to the Maya by the Spanish and eventually taken in similarly to, for instance, Canada. Canada was actually, the name itself came from a small village, not the entire country. So it's kind of same story, if you will.
Very cool. All right. Let's go back to Miss Camplin's class. If you guys have another question, go for it.
Okay, yeah, Ainsley's got a question here.
What language do they speak?
Good question. So the ancient Maya probably would have spoken a language that is what we would see in those glyphs that we saw. Remember, I was showing you how to read. So contemporary Maya, because of distance separating them, so in the Maya area, there's a lot of mountainous ranges. So there's distance and time separating multiple different groups of Maya. So because of that, we've got about 30 different Maya contemporary languages or modern languages. So I'll show you a couple of them. So just from the screen over here, for instance, in Guatemala, they speak primarily Quiche. Up in the Yucatan, they speak Yucateco. So it depends on what area you're looking at or where the Maya person is from, based on or what language they would actually speak.
Yeah, outstanding. Well, and another question from a group on YouTube, which might get you walking half the gallery again, is
That's okay.
from Mr. class, what's the oldest artifact in your collection? Do you have one that's particularly ancient?
Ooh, I would say, there's quite a few that are about the same time, but Jaguar Man, and there's a couple more. So we've got some more disintegrated stela that are pretty old. So they're all kind of around the 2000 mark. But I will show you one that looks really similar to cave paintings. So it's not that old, but the techniques are really old. So I want to show you this one. So walk with me, if you will. You get another peek. So the cool thing about this one is the Maya were really, really obsessed with dates. So they really like to date things. So because of that, they actually, every time they wrote a sentence, the beginning of the sentence would start with a number, because they just like when we start a new notebook, the first page that we start on, we date it. So this cave painting is really neat because it was actually done right after a celebration. And again, it's about, 2000 years old, and there's a date right on it, and it's showing what's happening during the celebration. So it's a really, really old version and of the art that we see. but it was kind of like a quick little sketch that I did after the celebration. So about 2,000 plus years old.
Very cool. All right, Ashley, we're going to take 2 more questions really quick.
Perfect.
So Miss Wells' class, if you have a second one, come on up, guys. A bunch of questions. Everyone's got a question.
Good.
You guys can ask 2. You know what? Ask 2. Go for it.
What was the jewelry made of, and was it durable?
Good question. So we're just around the corner from that. So I'm just going to quickly show you that. So the jewelry is usually made out of jade. So I had mentioned before, jade is just as strong, or almost, sorry, I should say, almost as strong as diamond. So it was very, very, very durable. But there's also jewelry made out of shells because, of course, a lot of the Maya were on the coast. Sorry, I've got a whispering voice in the gallery competing with me. But so the jewelry would have been very durable unless it was made out of shells, of course.
Yeah, excellent. And then Miss Wells' class, do you have a second question? Come on up, guys.
What did they eat?
Good question. So aside from special occasions with drinking cacao or chocolate, they typically would have eaten maize as a big part of their diet, so corn. So they would have eaten maize, beans, squash, different types of squash were really common. They also would have been eating beans as well. Sorry, I think I said beans, but mashed up in different manners. But yeah, that was the primary portion of their diet. But early Maya would have been actually eating mostly animals. So deer, for instance, was kind of their main source of protein.
All right. And then last but not least, we had a question asked from a group online, which is, what is the significance of the jaguar to the Maya people? It seems to be a recurring motif.
Yay! I love that question. So the jaguar is extremely special to the Maya because a lot of people don't really realize, and I actually, until I did this exhibit, did not know about this, but the jaguar hunts underwater. So they actually sometimes dive into the water to catch fish and things like that. So what the Maya believed was they actually thought that the world was sort of like a floating disc and the water that was below it was the underworld. So they thought that if you went into cave, they had a lot of caves around where they lived that they're called cenotes. So in these caves, they were often filled with water just because it was the water bed underneath, but they thought this was the entrance to the underworld. So any body of water was the entrance to the underworld. So the jaguar, a lot of them are black, if they're sort of a melanin jaguar. So they often would hop into the underworld and hop back out. And obviously they're a really large predator. So because of that, the Maya thought the animal was really significant because they could just hop in between, the different worlds, whereas the Maya themselves couldn't. So they thought that was really special.
Outstanding, Ashley. So before we wrap up, this has been such a great tour of the new gallery. One thing you guys noted in your chat bar is that you guys do digital tours of a variety of kinds. So we're going to pass that information to classes if you guys want to sign up or learn more about the Royal BC Museum Gallery and how you can take part. That's really fantastic stuff. But before we wrap up, Ashley, is there one last message you want to share with our classes about Mayan civilization, how they can learn more, what to be excited about? Yeah.
So the cool thing about the Mayan civilization is when we compare it to, for instance, ancient Egypt, we know a lot about ancient Egypt, but with Maya, like I mentioned before, pretty much half or over half of the entire, knowledge that we can learn about the Maya is still covered up by the rainforest. So I do recommend keeping an eye, especially on the news, for any kind of Maya discoveries, because this is a civilization, ancient civilization that we're still learning so much about. So I encourage you to, especially National Geographic and things like that, I encourage you to take a peek and look at the news stories that are constantly coming up. All right?
Marvelous. That's amazing. We'll be sure to pass along some great resources after we're done with the classes. So guys, I know a few of you had to go for lunch. So for our classes that are left, how we end every session, I'm going to demute your mics and you guys can join me, boys and girls, in saying a huge thank you to Ashley and the Royal BC Museum. To Ms. Campbell's class, Ms. Wells' class, go for it. You're both muted. Awesome, guys. Thank you so much for joining us for a really exciting October session. Ashley, that was marvelous. Thanks so much.
Thank you for joining us, everyone.